Hey, I'll see you in Rutherford, New Jersey, Minneapolis, Minnesota, Ontario, California, Davenport, Iowa, Las Vegas, Chicago, and Grand Rapids, Michigan. Go to jimmydore.com for a link for tickets. So I've showed you this video. You know Fauci's a big liar. He's constantly contradicting himself and getting caught in, but there's never a consequence. And I'll just show you this again. Here,
down schools if you
here he is lying about recommending lockdowns and lockdowns of schools. Here he
down
is.
schools if you had to do it all over again.
Well, you know, again, it's first of all, I didn't recommend locking anything down. You're asking me questions. You're talking about the CDC is the public health agency.
Mm-hmm. I recommended to the president that we shut the country down. And that was a very difficult decision because I knew it would have serious economic consequences.
So he's not used to dealing in a crisis like this with social media. So now people get and here's a little bit more. I'm going to show the reason I'm showing you this is because a congressman read him the Riot Act and listed all his crimes. And
do you regret particularly the last one, the shutdown, the sweeping shutdown that some said made things worse?
No, I don't, Neil. And in fact, I think we need to make sure that your listeners understand I didn't shut down anything.
I recommended to the president that we shut the country down.
And the only way to do that is by draconian means of essentially shutting down the country. We know that we can do that if we shut down.
Well, I think one of the things you really need to do, to the extent that you can shut down temporarily the country, I think is important.
Well, if I knew at the time that shutting down would have such a dramatic effect on controlling the spread, obviously we would have shut down earlier.
There are those who say you shut down you destructive things by disrupting the economy. And others say, well, if you save so many infections by shutting down, why didn't you shut down 2 weeks earlier?
But I don't regret saying that the only way we could have really stopped the explosion of infection was by essentially, I want to say shutting down. I mean, essentially having the physical separation and the kinds of recommendations that we've made.
You've been a big fan of Cuomo and the shutdown in New York. You've lauded New York for their policy. New York had the highest death rate in the world. How could we possibly be jumping up and down and saying, oh, Governor Cuomo did a great job? He had the worst death rate in the world.
No, you misconstrued that, Senator.
Okay. So I just the reason why I want to show you that is because this happened. This is Kim.com's calling it the fall of Fauci. COVID-19 is officially exposed as a U.S. government project, a virus engineered by U.S. scientists using a biolab in China for cover. The biggest crime against humanity killed more victims than the Nazi Holocaust against the Jews. Demand justice. So here we go.
Actually, you're not allowed to speak.
Your time has
Take your
expired.
Starbucks with you.
Mr. Garcia, Mr. Raskin, you're out of line. Your times have expired. I now recognize Dr. Jackson from Texas for 5 minutes of questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Dr. Fauci, I have to say, I, as so many Americans, am deeply disappointed in your actions during a critical time in our nation's history while you were in key leadership roles as the director of the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Disease and as the chief medical advisor to President Biden. Put quite simply, you failed miserably, in my opinion. Based on all we have learned during the pandemic and all that we have since learned through this committee's work, I believe your failures stem from both an effort of self-preservation, manifested by a series of lies and cover-up, and by a total failure of leadership. It was obvious to everyone that you and your organization, NIH, had a lot to lose if the American people were to discover that COVID-19 was most likely leaked from a lab in Wuhan, China, and that you, via EcoHealth Alliance and Peter Daszak, actually funded this research, and that this lab was actively and recklessly conducting gain-of-function research. As such, you did everything in your power to deflect and cover up this possibility. You even recruited others to help you in this effort. Unfortunately, this cost our country and the world valuable time that may have led to answers regarding the origin, may have blunted the spread, and would have almost certainly saved lives. While I think most of us have known all along what I just described, what I have been appalled to discover through sworn testimony to this committee is the level at which you and those that worked for you went to cover up the obvious. Just a few examples, and I know these have been touched on, but they're important for everyone to hear. Dr. Lawrence Tabak, former acting director of NIH, testified that under the generic definition that NIH did in fact fund gain-of-function research. This was based on a definition that was initially used by NIH and a definition that was abandoned and removed from the website in October of 2021 and replaced by a new, much more detailed definition with a much higher bar that you have since conveniently used to define gain-of-function testing and to deny what Dr. Tabak has since confirmed.
So what he's saying is that I've showed you that Rand Paul asked him twice if he funded gain-of-function research at the Wuhan lab, which we now know probably led to the virus. He said he didn't twice, and he just outlined how they changed the definition of what gain-of-function was. They took down the real definition of the NIH website, and they put up a bogus one. And so now he could deny it to Congress, like, no, well, if you look at this definition, we didn't do that. But then the head of the NIH just testified a week or two ago and said, yes, we funded gain-of-function research, completely contradicting him. So he's been caught a million different ways, and he's just recounting it. He knows he's been caught, but he also knows there's not going to be a price to pay.
Well, we're not going to go all the way to where the top, which would be the Pentagon, right?
The DARPA.
Dr. Jackson here ain't going to go against them.
That's right.
They're going to go against a fall guy who's not even going to take a fall.
He also said that EcoHealth Alliance failed to properly and promptly report that their research violated the terms of the grant, something that went completely unaddressed under your watch. Dr. Morans, your senior advisor, who you have tried today to distance yourself from, but whose large volume of emails clearly demonstrate that you had a very close and personal relationship with, and who reported to you directly, has openly bragged about how he subverted FOIA requests. I remind you that the law requires you and your former organization to comply with Freedom of Information Act requests. It is not optional. If you or your employees or your organization that you oversaw were systemically avoiding transparency and illegally hiding or destroying documents that rightfully belong to the American people, then you should be criminally charged, and they should as well. In addition, Dr. Gregory Folkers, your chief of staff, also engaged in illegal practices in which he crafted messages using symbols instead of letters to avoid FOIA exposure. In an email, April 2020, from Dr. Morans to Peter Daszak, he says, quote, "There are things I can't say." Well, I wonder what he couldn't say.
I wonder.
He also went on to say, quote, "Except Tony is aware, and I have learned there are ongoing efforts within NIH to steer through this with minimal damage to you, Peter, and colleagues, and to NIH and NAID," end quote. And then a few days later, he said, quote, "I have reason to believe that there are already efforts going on to protect you," end quote. In February of 2021, Dr. Morans wrote to Boston University scientist Gerald Kirsch saying, quote, "I learned from our FOIA lady here how to make emails disappear after I'm FOIA'd, but before the search starts. So I think we are all safe," end quote. Dr. Fauci, I want to know what you were being protected from and what you needed to be safe from. I'm going to go on because I have a little time here.
You're doing a great job.
He went on to say, quote, "Plus, I deleted most of the earlier emails after sending to Gmail. Once again, illegal and an actual crime." Dr. Morans noted in another email to Dr. Kirsch saying, quote, I learned the tricks last year from an old friend, Marge Moore, who heads our FOIA office and also hates FOIAs," end quote. It is absolutely amazing to me that Dr. Morans and Marge Moore still have jobs and our taxpayers are still paying their salaries. Dr. Morans wrote to...
So what he's describing is what Fauci's top assistant and the person in charge of the FOIA requests at the agency he's the head of, talking about subverting the law.
Our FOIA lady
and
that
hiding
hates FOIAs.
And that's right, and hiding stuff. And why would you have to hide stuff?
Because you're so stupid and cattle.
Because you're doing illegal stuff and you're creating viruses that, according to them, killed millions and millions of people.
Wait, who's powerful enough to protect a guy that powerful, I wonder?
Dr. Daszak in April of 2021, quote, "P.S. I forgot to say there is no worry about FOIAs. I can either send stuff to Tony on his private email or hand it to him to work or at his house. He is too smart to let colleagues send him stuff that could cause trouble." End quote. Apparently, you neglected to surround yourself with equally smart individuals. Dr. Morans wrote to another collaborator, Peter Hotitz, in June 2021, at Baylor College of Medicine that he had deleted all his emails related to COVID origin when, quote, the shit hit the fan, end quote. He said, quote, I feel pretty sure Tony were too. The best way to avoid FOIA hassles is to delete all emails when you learn the subject is pretty sensitive. In October 2021, Dr. Morans wrote to Peter Daszak, quote, Peter, from Tony's numerous recent comments to me and from what Francis has been vocal about over the past 5 years, we are trying to protect you, and they are protecting their own reputations as well, end quote. I'll just jump ahead. The American people can rest assured that we are going to continue to pursue answers and we continue to push for full accountability from you and your colleagues despite continuing efforts to try to cover this up. Dr. Fauci, history will not be kind to you and you will be known as the man who put his personal interests before the interest of the American people.
I can only hope that's true. I can only hope that history is not kind to Dr. Fauci, but you're going to need CNN, MSNBC, ABC, Fox News to report this, and they're not. They're not reporting. Well, Fox News is actually, they're showing the hearing.
Jimmy, I'm shocked that Peter Hotez, it turns out, was in on it.
Could you,
Dr. Hotez?
That very people that you were supposed to be protecting. Your actions, along with several others we have had before this committee, have completely eroded America's trust in our public health system and the agency that you represented for half a century. With that, I yield back.
Gentleman's time has expired, and now.
And just so you know, he's been talking about this gain of function. So that's just some of the lies. That's just some of the lies and illegal activity that everyone now knows that Dr. Fauci committed. That anyone who wants to know knows. Put it that way. But there's still people out there like that Harry Nissen kid who did an idiot test where he tweeted out, anybody think that Dr. Fauci, how many people here think that Dr. Fauci's a hero? And he got over 30,000 likes.
You think those are real likes?
I didn't think about that.
Yeah, that kid, those are artificially
I thought I would bring that perspective to the topic today, is the issue of pandemic preparedness. And if there's one message that I want to leave with you today, based on my experience, and you'll see that in a moment, is that there is no question that there will be a challenge to the coming administration in the arena of infectious diseases, both chronic infectious diseases in the sense of already ongoing disease, and we have certainly a large burden of that, but also there will be a surprise outbreak. And I hope by the end of my
How do you know there's going to be a surprise outbreak? That's why it's called a surprise.
Do aliens run our thing?
So that's this guy saying,
what is going on?
For him to be able to say that, if you were any kind of investigator, you would go, oh, that guy's planning to do something. How else would he know there's going to be a surprise outbreak? Then it's not a surprise if you can predict it. And of course,
there's going to be an outbreak in the future, you mean?
So
a surprise outbreak.
And so the theory is that some people are saying that they released the virus so they could get their mRNA thing through, because we've got other videotape of him saying that. Just because it's the flu, we have to make people afraid of it. I wish I had that video to show you that. And I wish I had that video, but I don't have it loaded today, but I do have it. And he said, well, it doesn't matter if they're not afraid. We have to make them afraid, and we have to make them take this new. And so a lot of people are saying they did this. They were funding this gain of function research, creating this virus, releasing it. And then the dual purpose was that they can then just make up out of thin air that you had to lock down and social distance, which is what they did. They made it up out of thin air. There was no science behind that ever. Fauci himself admitted in front of Congress that just appeared, and that there was no science behind it. And why would they do that? So then you have to do mail-in ballots. So there's all kinds. So there's all kinds of control stuff happening, and it all stems from him saying there's definitely going to be a surprise outbreak. What the fuck?
Is this on his Disney documentary?
So I don't,
Disney Plus.
I don't know where this
Dr.
is from.
Fauci,
And so when he was actually deposed, he didn't answer any questions. And here's the guy who actually deposed him. Listen to what he says.
By the way, when you deposed Dr. Fauci, how many times did he happen to say he didn't know or couldn't remember?
He said, I do not recall, or variations thereof 174 times, and adding in variations of I don't remember at least 212 times.
Wow. Smartest man on the planet couldn't remember 212 times?
He couldn't remember things, including things that he had told the national media, quote, I remember it very well. Then he would say 16 times, I don't recall details of that meeting.
Now, you you were near the top of your class at Harvard Law School, Rhodes Scholar. Is that right, Mr. Sauer?
I've submitted a biographical statement.
Yeah. Well, I looked at your biography. It's pretty impressive. Is that pretty high? You've done a lot of depositions. You've done a lot of legal work. You've deposed a lot of people. Is 212 times pretty high?
I've taken dozens of depositions. I've never seen anything like it, including in this case where other federal government witnesses frequently profess inability to recall.
So the guy who told us all these things, who's, the smartest man on the planet, he set a record. Highest you've ever seen and couldn't recall, didn't remember.
I've never seen anything like it.
Okay, page 4 of your testimony.
And I have very small glasses.
That's who he is. That's who Anthony Fauci is. And I just hope that Kim.com is correct when he says this is the fall of Fauci. And now, if you want to know, you know that he's a criminal and a psychopath. If you want to know, I have to remind people that there's a movie called The Dallas Buyers Club. Matthew McConaughey won an Academy Award for that. Do you remember what that movie was about? It was about the government suppressing treatments for AIDS that were effective and cheap. And so people were dying when they didn't have to. And who was the guy doing that? Dr. Fauci. Dr. Fauci was the bad guy in the Dallas Buyers Club.
He's been there that long.
And wouldn't it be nice if Matthew McConaughey came out and reminded people of that? Yeah, he's been there. Oh, yeah.
Just if he was here of a psychopath the whole time.
He's been here. He's been since the 80s. He's been the head of the NAID.
Before that.
So he was the one who oversaw AIDS. He made people afraid of it. You could get it from casual contact.
Hugging you.
Yes.
He really wants everybody 6 feet apart, huh?
The gay community broke into his office building, and they had his head on a stick. They literally had his head on a stick. People, that's all been memory hold. You never see that on TV news and never talked about in the Washington Post or the New York Times. Or my other cowardly comedians who host shows that pretend they're news shows, and they never talk about any of it. They never talk about any of it. The biggest scandal in the history of their life. People who do shows about exposing government secrets never once fucking mention any of this. So I hope Kim.com is right. I hope Kim.com is right that this is the fall of Fauci. Because as Neil as Neil Oliver said, he's not going to stop talking about it. He's not going to let people forget. I'm not going to let people forget. Those people who got COVID wrong and were for mandating people with experimental treatments and slandered my name as an anti-vaxxer, those people want to memory hole what they did during COVID. I'm not going to allow that to happen.
I wish I never got any shots so much. I wish so bad that
I'm so angry that I got it.
I didn't understand the level of...
I didn't either. And there were a lot of people who knew. I wasn't one of them. It wasn't until I looked into it after I got vaccine injured that I found out they were lying about everything and that this guy was at the head of everything, and he's a psychopath criminal.
I talked to friends in New York who got
boosters
this year.
Boosters this year.
New York is one of the dumbest places on earth now.
My old roommate got his booster. He's proud of it. We were at his Christmas party.
You get it. You're so dumb.
You come see me on tour in Rutherford, New Jersey, Minneapolis, Minnesota, Ontario, California, Las Vegas, Davenport, Iowa, Chicago, Illinois. We're doing a live panel video show, special surprise guests on that show, and Grand Rapids, Michigan. Go to jimmydore.com for a link for tickets, and make sure you go to Jimmy Dore because they don't want to buy it from a second reseller.